There is an old adage when many of the Northerners who had an incredible passion for NASCAR racing decided to pack up and kind of like the Oklahoma land rush, move south. The Southerners greeted those Yankees, transplanted as they were, as long as they knew they were going home. But in the world of NASCAR, if you hooked on, you became one of those damn Yankees. And my next guest is exactly that. Steve Letarte started his life in downstate Maine. And then at the very early age, he and his family packed up and headed south. And he joins me now. Steve, from Maine to Charlotte, North Carolina to Hendrick Motorsports, it's been a hell of a journey, my friend.
First of all, thanks for having me. It has been. It's been an amazing ride. I couldn't be more thankful for the opportunities I've been given. It really starts with my dad. I remember as a little kid on Route 25 at Don Letarte race cars, wide-eyed, eager as could be, watching either that week's late model or that week's modified be put together, and see Dick McCabe and Willie Elliott and Jamie Obie and my heroes walk throughout that shop. People talk about the NASCAR heroes, but for me, it really started in New England. All those Saturday night tracks, Friday night tracks, the ACT tour. I could go on forever. My love of racing was early in life, and in a much cooler temperature area of the country up in New England and Canada.
Yeah, well, we suffer from winter and 4th of July, the only two seasons.
That's it.
But Steve, you mentioned those great drivers, and they carved a name. But by the same token, you shoulder to shoulder with some really great names, and we'll get to NBC in a moment, carved really terrific names. Is there any difference between a Dale Jr. or a Jeff Gordon and a Dick McCabe or a Jamie Obie?
I think the reason I'm successful at my job is because in my mind there wasn't. There is. Jeff Gordon is single-handedly the most talented race car driver I've ever seen drive a race car in my life. I mean, it's no offense to the others, but when you see him and work with him, you're like, oh, wow. Like, it's amazing what these guys can feel. But the racer in me, it's the same, right? The racer in me, what I love about stock car racing, unlike every other sport, right? If you weren't blessed to be 6 foot something, you're not playing in the NBA. If you weren't blessed to be a certain size, you're not playing in the NFL. In motorsport, when a driver climbs in the window and puts the net up, male or female, short and tall, old or young, it's the great equalizer. What can you do on the racetrack? Now, some have more talent than others. Thank goodness. If not, I'd have been a driver, Jack. I'd have been a great driver. I would have been good at, talking to the fans. But I can't drive. I have no skill. But to your point, growing up in New England and seeing those great New England drivers, and then moving to NASCAR and seeing the great NASCAR drivers, in my mind, they're all drivers. They're all wonderful. They're all my heroes. I was very blessed to work with the whole group.
When did you set your sights on Hendrick Motorsports and a life in NASCAR at the Cup level? Because you graduated from high school and already you were on the road crew for Hendrick Motorsports and you were 16 years old.
I think that was the fork in the road. Ray Abraham let me come in, start sweeping the floors at 16. I graduated high school in December, so I didn't go a full season my senior year. The way school worked in Maine, I only had to go to high school until about December, which was great because it means I was available for the upcoming race season in 1997. And I think that was the moment in time where Ray, if he had his vote, would have forced me to go to college. He was always a huge proponent of me and what he thought I could do in my career, but he was also that mentor saying, go to school. Your job will be here. You don't have to panic. Go do something. But I had caught the bug. School wasn't going to be for me. I was already at the school I wanted to be. I was at the University of Hendrick Motorsports. And if you're going to be a racer, that's the best place to learn. And I didn't know if it was going to work out, but I think it was that moment, that winter of 96, showing my age, leading into 97, where I decided, I may end up in college next year, but for right now, I'm going to give this NASCAR traveling circus a try, and I fell in love.
Yeah, you became one of the carnies like the rest of us. Last week, I had Kyle Larson on the podcast, and I asked him quite simply, Steve, what the secret sauce was at Hendrick Motorsports. And his answer, I don't think would be surprising to you, but I think you can expound upon it. He very quickly said, Rick Hendrick himself, because Rick cares about people.
So, it's very simple. And nobody wants to believe it's that simple. And I think that's why they can hold on to the secret. Rick Hendrick races to win. In front of winning and in front of trophies are the men and women that make all of that happen. And I think that's been consistent. It hasn't always been easy. We've won races together. We've lost races together. We've seen tragedy. We've seen triumph. We've seen everything in between. And I take myself, for instance, I had an opportunity to leave Hendrick Motorsports to go do television. And when I sat down with Rick 2 or 3 times discussing me leaving, he kind of positioned some other opportunity, really wanted me to stay, gave me some different opportunity. But the last meeting I had, I walked in and Rick Hendrick sat down and I said, Rick, he goes, wait, I'm going to talk. And I kind of listened, yes, sir. And he goes, you don't have a job here anymore. You don't even have one available to you. I kind of looked at him and he said, I can tell you're doing this for the right reasons. You want to go spend time with your family. You want to do that. He said, so I'm going to make the decision easier. You're not welcome here anymore. You got to go. And then that's really the difference, right? You're sitting in front of a millionaire, perhaps a billionaire, and could absolutely do something and twist my arm to keep me to stay because it was better for perhaps him or his team or what he needed. But instead, he put me first, my family first, my kids first. And while that seems like a small gesture, that's Rick to a nutshell. That's why people never want to leave. That's why people that don't work there want to end up there. And that's why, great companies can only be torn down from the inside. So if you make the people within the inside the most important thing in your life, then it's pretty much the best armor you can have.
And you hit the beach at full throttle, moving over to NBC. And I have said this many, many times. I grew up and it was all about ABC, from Wide World of Sports to Jim McKay, the Olympics, the litany is it's everywhere. But NBC Sports has become the ABC of the 21st century. And when they took on the project of NASCAR racing and then expanded into all forms of racing, how heavily did they lean upon you?
Well, it started with me and Jeff Burton and Rick Allen. They put some headsets on us and said, we're going to just cover some races. And they obviously gave us a lot of foundation practice ready to go. But then I think with our success in our NASCAR coverage, the key to all this is Sam Flood, our boss at NBC, loves motorsports.
Yeah, indeed.
And he, I think, to your point, we'd have those meetings where he didn't really ask, whether we thought it was a good or a bad idea, but he would just have that stare across a glass of wine and say, hey, what would you think if we got the whole IndyCar schedule? Wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't it be cool to see an Indy 500 on NBC? And then he kind of put the blanket, well, what else is out there? And I think one dinner we were at, we said, listen, the IMSA series is unbelievable. I think the Rolex is undercovered. I think it's a marquee event we should talk about more and more and more. And his commitment to motorsport, I think, is what reinvigorates us week in and week out. To know that our bosses want to be in this space, that our bosses want to tell the story, that our bosses want to make sure everyone knows how great Kyle Larson is and how spectacular of a champion Chase Elliott is. And they're not afraid of, and this is what I really like, they're not afraid of, and they entrust in me to talk about the nuts and bolts. Because most TV guys will be like, oh man, we don't want to talk about horsepower and downforce and pitch strategy. That's boring. We want to talk about sparks and 200 miles an hour. But the fact that they are willing to allow our booth to prioritize what we discuss and tell what we as racers feel the story is. We're heading to Daytona this week, and a rules change with less power and less drag. People say, oh, no, it's about the playoffs and it's this. And I'm like, competitors, it's about that. They're changing their whole approach because of these rules you don't want to talk about. They empower us to bring those up in the broadcast, and I think the race fan loves that we speak to them with a level of intelligence that we know they love the sport.
Look, I come from the school where I don't care whether you put 2 turns in the right rear or whether the C-pillar's been adjusted. But to your point, and I think you're being far too humble upon yourself, many of the air quotes technical analysts, they do nothing but just regurgitate all of this stuff and don't help the average listener understand it. And I'm not trying to be Dr. Phil here, but Steve, you take your career as a race fan and you mix that with your expertise as a crew chief for 20 years, and you distill it down and create a product that even to an old fart like me, I find fascinating, because I feel all of a sudden as if you're not telling me what just happened, you're telling me, just like a crew chief needs to be proactive, what may happen.
what may happen, and you use two words there that it's my foundation of everything. I only talk about the what if it affects the why.
Right.
The fan wants to know the why. They can see the what. We're not radio. We have cameras. They can tell, look, what's happening? Well, just look at your TV. This is what is happening. Rick Allen paints the most beautiful play-by-play of the what. He doesn't need our help there. What Rick does, though, is he stays out of the way of the why. So when he says, Steve, this is what's happening, why is it? Boom. It's as simple as that. Take the what and explain the why. And to your point, the nuts and bolts only matter if it affects the why. If it doesn't affect the why, then it's just stubborn, right? We want to talk about the stuff that you don't really need to know. It's the story of the race that you have to kind of, every race, Jack, you know this better than anyone. Every single race is an organic living thing.
Yeah.
You can run the same race with the same drivers, with the same rules on the same track on a different day, and the results will be anything. Forget the results. The race itself will look nothing like it. I've gone to Oxford 250s that run 230 laps green. I've gone to Oxford 250s where it's all about the scoring because you've had 200 laps of caution, right? I've seen them both. And the point is you just go to be prepared and try to stay ahead of the stories. But the biggest story that I think people miss is it's not the competitors, it's not the cars, it's not the rules. The race is the biggest story we cover. And I have a producer that believes that and coworkers that believe that. And damn, Jack, I get to commentate races I would have watched anyway. I mean, the 4 hours on a Sunday, that was peeled out. I was doing this regardless.
Exactly. Yeah, but the other thing that you do, Steve, and it may be missed by a lot of people, you have a little conspiratorial side to your brain. Every once in a while, you'll drop a dime, and maybe it's because, like you, I've spent my entire life since I was 5 years old, but I can't recall. It was something at Indy and for the IndyCar race. And you said, well, maybe he's doing this, or he could take advantage of the loophole this way. You can't escape that, Letarte. It's ingrained into your DNA.
It is. My dad has been teaching me since I was a little kid, losing his wrenches in the sandbox, that racing is a jigsaw puzzle, and whoever tries to figure out the puzzle the hardest, whoever gets to the correct answers first, they're going to be the most. And he said the worst thing you can do is try to put the puzzle together the same way every day. And that's how, when I watch a race, I watch it from a competitive mindset. Now, Jack, listen, I still have my bucket list. Don't get me wrong. I love my job, and I love covering races for television. But if I had a chance to work an Indy 500, to work a Rolex, or to work perhaps a Le Mans, those are the three big ones that I would love to try to tackle from a strategic standpoint. I don't have the time, patience, or intelligence to make one of them fast, but I do think I have the time, patience, and intelligence to dissect the race perhaps a different way. And those are the three right across the world. Those three I would love to take part in from atop of pit box.
Look, friend, I don't think there's any doubt that you may get to cross those. One final thought, because the hot topic since the road race at Indy for the Cup cars was Kyle Larson and a possible Indianapolis 500 start. I had him on the podcast. And look, you're intuitive. I'm intuitive. Read between the lines. I don't mean to be a rumor monger, but I think he's headed there, my friend. I think he's looking for a one-off.
I think he's good enough to. And I think that Rick Hendrick 10 years ago tried to hold these drivers so tight because they were so important. I think he's now surrounded himself with these youthful, energetic drivers that he realizes to make them the best, to allow them to go spread their wings no matter how risky. So listen, I think Kyle Larson would be amazing for IndyCar. He's not the only one. I think my old buddy I was sitting on the pit box with, the Indianapolis 500, he might be running the road course at Indy, but I believe Jimmy Johnson, I would be shocked if we don't see him in the Indianapolis 500.
Me too.
So I agree. And, I think the race fans deserve it. The race fans should applaud owners like Rick Hendrick and sanctioning bodies. Like, remember that IndyCar NASCAR double at Indianapolis? I'm not sure got enough play because the fan might not have understood how magical that was, but you and I get it, right? Here are the two series that wouldn't even return emails 20 years ago, and now we're having a race at the same facility.
Before I let you go, we were met with some very tragic news earlier this week, or actually last week, when we lost Robin Miller. I'm going to a little bit later in the show have a tribute to him, much the way I did with Bob Jenkins. But Your thoughts about Robin Miller, because while he spent the majority of his time in the world of IndyCar racing, he was a very expansive thinker, and he always, I think, shared the same passion that you, Jeff Gordon, myself, just a host of people that became his friends shared, and that's a passion for motorsports in general. Your thoughts?
I think, when you Robin Miller, much like Bob Jenkins, you're talking about the heroes that helped cultivate my love of motorsport.
Yeah.
While I was around it, my love of motorsport and national motorsport were the men and women that brought it to my radios, my TVs, my newspapers, my magazines. And Robin Miller was that one. And Robin did it only how Robin could. He threw two-seam, chin-high fastballs, pitch after pitch after pitch. I made the transition from competition to broadcasting. He was one of those journalistic icons that was on my Mount Rushmore that said, I'm not going to try. My crew chief career was built after all the great crew chiefs I was fortunate enough to work for. Well, my journalism broadcast career is built around, I call it my Mount Rushmore of journalism. The ones that had such an authentic, believable, likable following and deserved it. And Robin Miller was one of those, right? I didn't want to be Robin because nobody could be Robin, but his style was infectious if you loved him and infectious if you hated him. And that's indeed what made him so wonderful at his job. And motorsport has lost someone dear to it. And there's a vacuum. We all have to remain, because he carried a huge load of bringing motorsport to the fan base around the world. And every one of us, none of us can carry that load. We're going to have to find a way to divvy up that huge load through the hundreds and hundreds of us that still do it. That's the only chance we have, because nobody will ever replace it.
Well said, my friend. Listen, looking forward to the remainder of the season. Do appreciate your visiting with us, and continued success as you try to help knuckleheads like me understand what's going on top of these pit stands in the minds of these strategists, whether it's NASCAR, IMSA, I don't care, whatever you get assigned to. It's been a real treat. And I should point out, you still have racingjobs.com, and I'm an avid listener to Motor Mouse. Man, you field those softballs, but what I love is the way you can take a hot poker to whether it's Kyle or even when you got Jeff wound up the way you did after Indy.
It's great. It's great. I have some great coworkers. The fans call in, make the show great. Listen, the fans make it all work. Jack, I appreciate the time. It's always good catching up. Best of luck in the future, and I can't wait for this final run in the championship. This NASCAR season is going to be wonderful.
Me neither. Hey, coming up next, don't go anywhere, because we will get to that after we take this time out. Steve, it was great.
Absolutely, Jack.
I appreciate it, pal. I know
Anytime.
you're busy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.